Welcome to the last lunch W block in Frenchay from the Center for Print Research. Just to say again, this session is recorded, and I'm really pleased to welcome Angie Butler, Dr. Angie Butler, and Neve Fahy to today's session, who will be talking to us about all sorts of everything concerning with bookmaking, letterpress, and the whole process around it. So, without further ado, just want to introduce, just hand over to Angie and Neve. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Frank. So, hi everyone. Thanks for my colleagues to join me in the room today. You can't see them, but maybe you can see them, but I can. So that's a really nice support. Thank you. And hi to everyone who's joining us online in the UK and in Scandinavia and the Nordic countries. Thanks very much for tuning in. So today I'm going to be talking with my colleague, Research Associate Neve Fahy, and current PhD candidate, after I show you a film. And also do feel free to put your questions in the chat for after the video. So I'd like to show you this film. I presented this talk at Abbey in Australia. That's the Artist Book Brisbane event, which was initiated by Dr. Tim Mosley. And I've been wanting to show this and having another opportunity. So today's the day. So thanks for joining us. So Frank, if you can start off the film and then we'll do Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Such books of handwork and hybridity remember the body. Heavy on this planet and in this space and moment, the book in hand, completing the circle from artist to press to reader, and completing us in turn. I find these words, written by American scholar and curator Betty Bright, both captivating and complex. In essence, I think they encapsulate a whole approach for the maker of letterpress printed artist books, through the handling of tools, how one develops knowledge through a lived experience of practice, and how the evidence of making remains visible through the actions and processes performed in the creation of a book to its reader. The sentence is taken from Bright's book chapter, Handwork and Hybrids, Recasting the Craft of Letterpress Printing in Extraordinary Craft and Contemporary Art. Bright's chapter is important to me as it was in 2011 and remains today the only book chapter that discusses letterpress printing from within the perspective of contemporary artist books practice. And inspired by her words, I set out to interrogate Bright's quote and extend its methodology from a practice-led perspective, to investigate how UK-based contemporary artist publishing activities that employ the letterpress process are embedded in how practitioners articulate their bodies and senses to engage with materials, equipment and presses to develop their work. So just to set the context for this type of practice, we can look back on a historical lineage of approach. UK-based creative practitioners in the early 1970s were able to acquire their own presses for self-publishing. Utilisation of the letterpress process, environment and lived experience united practitioner, process and form and emerged as a studio practice. And this ethos progressed the associations of letterpress printing from historical notions of craft to contemporary theories of bodily experience and experiential learning that are aligned to current individual and collaborative practice. So in thinking about how we use our bodies to progress our practice today, I needed a framework in order to study this type of making, and that framework was phenomenology. The study of things that have a tangible presence, that are known of through our intuition and experience using our senses, is the basis of phenomenology. Our fundamental contact with things arises from a practical synthesis, so from handling them, looking at them, and by using them. Philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty uses the concept of the body as a receptor that shapes our knowledge through experiencing the world, and explores the practical grasp that we have of our environment. The making of letterpress printed artist books requires one to work within a framework of slow principles. So slow is not just anti-speed. Being slow within creative practice is about the engagement with the hand, allowing time and integrity to be valued as central to the artistic process. So the composing stick and the printing press can be seen as slow technologies, ones that allow the practitioner time for reflection, a continuing dialogue between practitioner, composing stick and press as an integral component of the creative process. As practitioner AM describes, you can't set or distype if you're angry or have a storm of words going on in your head. You start doing it and you always come down to the level of the job, and that's true. You can't go any faster than this. This is how fast it goes. So there's something necessary in my work about my mind coming down to that level, the pace of the job. As you do, you find yourself coming down to quite a nice place. I like the process of it, and I think that process is important. It's an important part of any art form. This is a perceptive reflection, the realization that the practitioner has to adjust to the appropriate pace that typesetting requires, if the task is to be not only completed successfully, but also with an innovative approach. Some practitioners spoke of forming words and narrative on the composing stick and on the press bed. The fact that they may reconsider text during the process and change out words because of the visual appearance of the typeset in the stick or the spatial relationship of some words to others in the text block. This approach is also evidence of reflection in action as part of a conceptual process to find a visual and physical voice in addition to the craft of typesetting. Donald Schoen defines reflection as knowing in action. This can be applied to working with the letterpress process, as by nature situations are thrown up that don't present themselves as givens, but are constructed from events that are puzzling, troubling, or uncertain. And this is shown by practitioner AM again, who says, you can put exactly the same amount of pressure, have the rollers in exactly the same position, and there is a different result. Why is that? Atmospheric conditions, stiffness of the ink, and so on. There are so many things that mitigate against it. But almost every time you print something, it's like learning how to print. This suggests that the practitioner is reflective in their working practice, so from informed practice. Although with particular problems that arise in the printing process, that process never becomes mechanical. A slow framework allows the type of reflection for thinking with the body through movement to articulate material thinking in how tools, equipment and materials are guided by our own perception and handability of technology. In thinking through the process in a collaborative sense, we can see our movements within the work and on the press itself. As practitioner NC observes when working with a printing press, you have a connection. There is some control, but it's also a partnership. It's the same with any tool that you're familiar with, that you're using it almost prosthetically, and that's when the best things happen. This resonates with Barbara Bolt's arts-related concept of material thinking, where the individual is decentralised from the creative process by asserting ideals of co-responsibility and indebtedness between people, materials, technology and methods of practice. And in doing so, the focus also shifts from the artwork to the collaborative practice that sets the artwork on its way to existence. So to read the work becoming itself through the relationships of the people, movements, tools and machines that then bring it into being. So whether practitioners are refining technical craft skills or developing creative ideas on press, the approach is the same, so through haptic inquiry. Naturally, there needs to be a conscious understanding between the experience during practice and then through reflection on experiences, implementing the knowledge that's grown during that creative process. and this is through praxis. We can come to a better understanding of the commitment to our creative actions by framing our creative practice. Reflection on action involves reflecting on how practice can be developed after the creative act has taken place. So exploring reflection on action, both with individuals and as a collaborative group, can be examined through praxis, theoretically reflective action, as part of the research process. Paulo Fieri's philosophy of praxis implies a life practice informed by oneself, suggesting that we provide ourselves with the tools that lead us to transformation. In art practice, by discussing how our creative actions impact on our own lives and affect others, we can critically assess our own practice and our relationship to others, to share meanings and to contextualize knowledge. Printing and bookbinding require an attentiveness of the body to the activity in progress, so the practitioner develops an embodied knowledge of their studio practice. And in the process of art making, some of this knowledge is tacit. This type of knowledge is not something that's necessarily learnt explicitly, honed, or memorised. It's participatory knowing from a performed experience, by indwelling, by being somewhere doing something, engaged in extended practice. Michael Polanyi believed that when we create, we use our sensory perception in order to process, understand, and come to know something. Polanyi's argument was that informed guesses, hunches, and imaginings that are part of exploratory acts are motivated by what he described as passions. These acts formulate a deep sense of knowing, which he framed as tacit knowing. Tacit knowing was revealed to practitioner PW through comparing old and new work. And they say, you are learning all the time when you're making your own books without realising it. Subconsciously it happens. If I look back on work that I printed a while ago, then it becomes apparent, but you don't realise it until you begin to compare previous work. The practice of keeping proof prints and artist proof copies are substantiated through the reflexive process. The practitioner is engaged in praxis as they can access their transformed state through the critical comparison of their work. Practitioner AM confirms the natural process of view and evaluation. One gets better through doing. So here AM references reflection in action as a strategy for overcoming particular problems encountered during the process. But you need to be physically engaged with the process as opposed to reading or observing to improve both artistic and technical capabilities. The reflective process requires a slow approach to enable dialogue between practitioner, materials, process and press in order to move forward. These selected responses from practitioners, along with many others, formed a guided experience of the process of making artist books, investigating experience thought of as a form of activity, placing experience at the centre of knowledge building. With the practitioner relaying the whole process of bookmaking, nuances were uncovered that would not necessarily be spoken about if discussing formal aspects of practice, such as leaving a few unresolved pages so that during the process of making a book, those pages will develop as thinking as part of making, or that some practitioners work on one page at a time to suit the specific requirements of the artist's book, whereas in traditional bookmaking or book printing, one would work on a spread. So practitioners' own words were vital in addition to my own to represent the collective voice of practice in letterpress printed artist publishing in the UK. Art practice as research qualified the process of making a letterpress printed artist book as a form of inquiry. By making work together, we understood that knowledge held through the experience of making was present in the minds and bodies of all the practitioners that took part and confirmed Bright's approach. It was demonstrated within artefacts produced, such as the artist's book, Feeling for an Edge, which lies, waiting for its reader, to complete the circle of a synthesis of understanding through the experience of reading. The book in hand, completing the circle from artist to press to reader, and completing us in turn.
Hello, everyone. Well, I'm not sure how much you saw of that video, but it will be online later on the CFPR website. So if you missed some of it and do want to see any of it replayed, I'm really sorry about that. But you can watch it again if you want to. So let's go on to a Q&A. If anyone has any questions they want to put in the chat, if you did get to see any of this, please feel free. Maybe we could start off with Neve asking a first question, if that's okay.
Yeah, so thanks, Angie, for sharing your research. It's so interesting, and I think we can all learn a lot. One of the first things that stood out to me was you've chosen a very purposeful form in how you've made the video. There's also this sense of the body being really involved, the angles. Can you talk a little bit why you decided to make it in this way?
Yeah, sure. It's my own research and my own practice. Obviously, the embodied knowledge is really imbued in that. So I want to try and share with you that sense of touch, that embodiedness through film. So everyone has read by tracing a line with their finger. So by doing that in real close up, I'm hoping then to connect with you and your own experiences. So then you feel connected with the video and the words that I'm saying. Also, it's that thing of trying to actually think about people's memories and references of their feelings, physical feelings, and connection with physical actions as well. So trying to do that through the form of film, really.
Really interesting. And I think this research gives us like a really good insight into what it is to be a craft practitioner. And you draw attention to this notion of reflection and action as part of informed practice, while also acknowledging that the process never becomes mechanical. And I think that's something that would really speak to anyone involved in craft. You don't just master a craft and then start behaving like a machine. You're responding to nuances all the time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, you're right. Thank you, Neve, for understanding. Also, if you have a framework for practical work, it really helps practitioners then reflect on their work, not just work that's been done quite a while ago, but also more recently. So if you provide that framework, it really supports the development of practice in craft and in art practice too. Also, I think with having that reflection on action and reflection in action, it gives you also a framework for collaboration, so you can work with other people more successfully. And then praxis comes in that sense of kind of theoretically reflecting on your actions as well.
And it also seems to just kind of highlight that sensory perception, the potential of it in education, to really acknowledge what that can do for different types of learning. Yeah,
and that kind of, I don't know whether with your another question has a kind of slow approach to it, but if I can kind of just pick up on that a minute, having the framework of a slow approach, as I said, isn't just slow in that sense of being slow in action, but the support of kind of slow technologies really helps you then think through the process of what you're doing and allows you time to reflect, but also time to develop work while it's in the process of making, which I think is really important, not only just afterwards, but actually in the doing of it.
And you also mentioned that Betty Bright has the only chapter around this subject, but you actually you've written a chapter, and that's coming out this year.
Yes, it's published by Peter Lang, coming out at some point this year, edited by James Mussell and Caroline Archer-Perret. And I'm really indebted to Betty, who really helped me when I was starting my PhD think about framing book arts theoretically, but specifically letterpress within book arts practice. And so her quotes and her writing has really influenced me. So I really wanted to take that on and be able to respond to her in my own writing as well.
Great. And so many of us here in CFPR were familiar with your more recent research, but since you've completed this project, your work has evolved quite a bit. Last year you were awarded the Vice Chancellor's Fund. So could you tell us a little bit how the work is evolving and developing in your new research projects?
Yeah, I think from the video that you've seen, there were kind of touch points that the issues with and issues that came up, and this kind of guided practice through making a letterpress printed artist book. But what I wanted to do then was take that further. So look outside of my own research field and see if I could develop a methodology that related to craft practice in general. So looking at other craft practices and then seeing if we could actually transfer embodied knowledge. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, a project with another CFPR research associate, Sophie Boons. And we're taking lots of methods, so audio, video, transcription, etc., to then put together to try and to capture data from people making in their craft practice, and then seeing if we can build a methodology that can be innovative, that can be applied to other craft practices. So we're doing that with craft practitioners that are centered around the book as well.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned before you're really interested in challenging this idea of mind-body dualism, and how you can do that through the research you've mentioned. And I was just wondering how you feel this takes kind of craft practice beyond the superficial or maybe the taken for granted. What do you think that might expand our kind of our knowledge of how we learn craft or how we teach craft?
Yeah, I think if we in Western culture, we're really kind of guided by our eyes, I think, predominantly. And so this methodology where we're looking at sound, we're looking at smell, we're looking at touch, all of these different elements within our bodies, but also it can then be transferred into thinking about how we learn. So if we have those elements embedded in sharing our skills and our knowledge, then what we can do is really kind of help people to learn more quickly, but also with more attention in that sense to what elements within a practice can we pinpoint that actually make a difference between getting something right and really being able to kind of extend our practice as well.
Yeah, so sensory kind of consideration of the body and senses as not a replacement for rational thought, but more of an ontological extension of how we think and
exactly. It's trying to see us as beings.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely ontologically, rather than thinking. I remember I was giving a talk yesterday, and we were talking about thinking and doing, and actually, to me, thinking and doing are the same thing. It's just that you're doing it with your whole being. So trying to stop that vocabulary, if you like, of separating mind and body, and actually trying to sort of think within us that being more attentive to what we're doing with all of our senses at the same time.
Yeah, certainly more inclusive, I think, way of thinking about things. So I'm just going to check if there's anyone in the chat or here who'd like to ask a question, because I've asked plenty.
Karina.
Thank you. That was fascinating, and as you say, building on yesterday, which I think was, also equally wonderful. I want to kind of come back to the idea of slow, because I think the kind of the slow movement is something which is has kind of captured a lot of people's activities from a whole range of different disciplines. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about, as you say, that it's not about doing things slowly, but it's also about a mindset and about how you, that conversation and that community as well. And I think what you're also doing is very much a community aspect.
Yeah, it's looking outwards with practice rather than being insular in that sense and that's why I say about kind of the collaboration with doing projects with letterpress artists, book practitioners. It's really allowed me to then expand that idea of slow making, but as a philosophy, that kind of attentiveness and value that we can spend time actually really allows us to then be more creative with what we're doing. So you have more engagement as well, but also you can apply that then much more outwardly with your practice. If you have that, it's a much more enriching experience then. And you do build these communities of people who have a similar philosophy. That's why I started doing my PhD, was because I didn't have a community of letterpress artist bookmakers, and I knew that there were other people making letterpress printed artist books. There must be more people like me, and part of the PhD was to find that community. But it is very much an ethos, I think, that has been applied, as you say, to lots of different aspects of our lives. And I think that also really kind of links in with praxis, because especially with the social sciences where it was used first, it's thinking of communities and taking your practice outwardly. So what effect practice can have on other people socially, as well as bringing it back to ourselves then and in the studio, and what we can learn from that too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Angie and Neve. Are there any more questions from the audience? Can't see anything else on the chat. There's one more in the chat. A comment. Is there anything in the chat? Let's go to the general chat. We're just coming to your question there. No? Nope. No more questions. Excellent. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, that concludes today's lunchtime seminar. Then again, thank you very much to Neve and to Angie. And just a reminder that the recording will be available on the cfpr.ue.ac.uk website with complete sound, with full sound from the video. I do apologize for the mistake there. Today the gremlins were in the system somehow, but the sound will be there, the video will be there, so I'll upload it by tomorrow. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. And yes, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.